Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, more employment opportunities await overseas Filipino workers this year. And as other nations look to hire more Filipino nurses, how will this affect the healthcare system in the country? Also, we get an update on the unpaid wages claims of over 12,000 OFWs who work in Saudi Arabia. Migrant Workers Secretary Toots Ople joins us in the program. Good news for Filipinos looking to work abroad. More job opportunities await overseas Filipino workers this year. The Migrant Workers Department says more nations are interested to hire nurses from the Philippines. The country, however, is facing a shortage of nurses due to migration. This has prompted the government to study the standardization of the salaries of healthcare workers to make them stay in the Philippines. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Migrant Workers Secretary Toots Ople. Secretary Toots, it's good to see you again. Welcome to the source.
Yes, Pinky, always happy to be here.
I know you're so busy. You've had a number of press conferences. I just want to start with the deployment outlook of Filipinos. What is it looking like this year during the first 6 months of 2023?
Well, I'm happy to report, Pinky, that for the first 5 months of this year, we have already met halfway the entire deployment figures for the whole of 2022. So we see an increase in the number of our OFWs, both new hires and rehires, and also we are looking at a rebound in the number of seafarers being hired abroad. And just to give you some data from January to April, we were able to deploy a total of 800,000 OFWs. That's both for the land-based and the sea-based. And while for the entire 2022 deployment, it was at 1.2 million. So you can see that we are not just on track, but we definitely will surpass the deployment figures of last year.
Do you have a target deployment for 2023?
Well, we don't really have a target in terms of deployment numbers because we're looking at the quality of the jobs, which is why we are doing our best to negotiate the best terms that we can get under the bilateral labor agreements currently being negotiated by the DMW. But what we are seeing, Pinky, is that the demand is not only for health workers.
Yeah.
In fact, for Saudi Arabia, what they need are construction workers, hotel and restaurant, and IT workers. And the same goes for Croatia, that would like to enter into a bilateral labor agreement with us. They told us that they would require thousands of hotel and restaurant workers for their tourism expansion programs. The same for UAE. So it's not just really although I'm sure that there's a sharp focus on our health workers and rightly so, but we still have a deployment cap on our nurses to be sent abroad through the private sector, which is at 7,000 annually. As of May of this year, we are at the 4,000 mark. So
we have 3,000 left.
That's where we are. Yes, we have 3,000 left.
But you know, Toots, I heard one of your press conferences where you said that I know there's a lot of in-demand jobs, but let me just focus first dito po sa ating mga nurses. That's been
Sure.
a problem for many years because of the salary, because of the compensation, because there's really so
Right.
much more. They earn so much more abroad. But there are so many countries now that want our nurses. Meron pong United States, meron pong Germany, meron din pong Singapore. And in fact, you said, the demand is huge in capital letters
Yeah.
and bold letters. Sabi nyo nga po, ganun sila gustong-gustong makuha ng ibang bansa.
Yes. But in our talks with them, they also are very conscious of the need for us to maintain our own domestic supply of health workers. And here we're not just talking about the nurses, ano. Very conscious naman sila kasi ang ka-deal natin with nurses are usually the more developed countries. So ito yung mga European
Yeah.
and the US and Canada and Japan
I
and
see.
Singapore. And they want to contribute nga to a scholarship fund that we are now working on with CHED, so we can have a so they can contribute to that fund, and we can have nursing students from the poorest barangays able to cope with the cost of education nowadays until they are
Yeah.
able to have their own internship programs with local hospitals here.
Right. Which countries would you say are aggressively hiring nurses?
Nako, in terms of may parang Canada is really aggressive, and I think the US has always been mainstream of jobs for our health professionals. But Vienna is talking to us about a bilateral labor agreement as well, and they need nurses. So it's really kung tutuusin, Pinky, it's the choice of our experienced nurses, which part of the world
They
they
have-
want to go to.
They have so many options.
They have so many options. But it will take a whole of government, whole of society approach. So we can also, to stay here would be the most attractive choice because their families are here. Then we really have to be consistently on the ball
Right.
when it comes to that. We need to create opportunities for them to stay and look at quality of life issues as well.
Right.
Kasi doon, Pinky, they are well treated na may pathway pa for reunification with their families, and yung iba they're even willing na with the language requirements, yung ganun. So dito naman we also need to make them feel na, kasi we always tell them para sa bayan, di ba? Hashtag para sa bayan. And
Paano naman yung para
parang
sa pamilya nila? Hindi ho ba?
Parang I think it also sends a wrong message kasi nag-nurse yan kasi may bukasyon niyang hinahabol eh. 'Di ba? That in itself is noble enough. So if this is really para sa bayan, then I think yung tayo naman na nasa bayan should also
Make it attractive
find
for
ways
them.
and means
Yeah, to find it attractive.
to help them.
Right.
Oo.
To encourage them to stay, to give them enough siguro benefits. But again, that would be a problem on budget and yung kanilang the salary standardization law. I guess to end this topic, I wanted to ask you, there's a cap. Sabi nyo nga po, Sec Toots, meron pang 3,000 left no, na maaaring mag-abroad because of the cap imposed by government. Have you had talks with Secretary Herbosa to find ways to be able to keep our nurses here because we want them here and encourage them to stay?
Well, the conditions for work here domestically would have to be a product of dialogue, not just between DOH and DMW, but also with DOLE, also with the private sector, the Hospitals Association, and even PhilHealth, no, should join that conversation. So yes, I intend to reach out with and talk to Secretary Herbosa, but we would also like to spearhead a dialogue with other relevant government agencies also present,
Such as
not just DMW not just DMW and DOH. DOLE, of course,
PhilHealth.
the different health organizations, civil society in healthcare.
Yeah.
I mean, this has to be a product of many minds and hearts.
I hope that happens soon. We need to take a very short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Migrant Workers Secretary Toots Ople. I have so many other issues that I need to discuss, Secretary, but there's concern and interest in what you said earlier, this scholarship for nurses. Tell us more about this and what is the process, who's going to give the scholarship, who are entitled, and when?
Yes, actually, this is one project that I'm passionate about, ano. And it came from a directive from no less than our president in one of the cabinet meetings. So ang nag-uusap dito ay DMW and CHED. The funding for the scholarships will be coming from our external partners. So kami yung sa resource mobilization. And already we're talking to Canada through their embassy here, and they are just waiting for the mechanics and the concept behind the scholarship fund. Kami naman, we are waiting for CHED kasi kami lang ang bring in ng contributions to that fund, but ultimately it will be CHED that will be administering the fund. It will be open to third and fourth year nursing students, and we will fund their education. We are hoping to reach out to those from the poorest families kasi, Pinky, para sa akin, basta may nurse ka sa pamilya, may mag-aalaga, lalo na sa mga magulang habang tumatanda, sa mga bata, sa mga may mga karamdaman. And then at the same time, economically viable kasi they can work overseas, they can work here. I mean, employment should not be a problem, especially domestic employment. Yun lang there are a lot of things that will have to come into play para mas attractive siya for our nurses.
But it's going to be funded. But Secretary,
we hope to,
it will be funded by who? Government?
It will be funded. No, it will be. That's why the DMW is actively pursuing this, because it will be funded by the governments that have sought bilateral labor agreements with us for the deployment of health workers, and also the private sector here and abroad who part of their social conscience is to ensure that there's a balance in the supply of nursing professionals here, and for those who wish to live for greener pastures abroad.
So, other countries, you're talking to different countries for bilateral labor agreements. I hope I'm understanding this correctly. To be able to pool resources and funds to pay for the scholarship of nurses. Tama po ba? Am I getting it right?
There are countries where we already have existing bilateral labor agreements. For example, with Canada, we also have with Japan and other countries as well. Now, but nothing prevents us from bringing this up with our partners. For example, Canada has expressed a solid interest in helping us put up this scholarship fund.
I see.
Kasi sabi nila, we don't want to be taking advantage then. Kasi their pay is so much higher. No? But they are conscious of the need to make sure that our own health system will not
Doesn't collapse.
will not collapse
Yeah.
because of overseas demand. So ganon, it's really now a matter of putting together the mechanics for the fund. The other countries and our other private sector partners are just waiting
Okay.
for the Philippine side.
So am I correct in saying that it's funds coming from other countries plus
Yes.
the government plus the private sector?
Yes, on the government side, Ched, we would have to talk to Ched about it. I've been reaching out. In fact, before your program, Pinky, I've been sending Viber messages to my good friend, Ched Chairman Popoy De Vera. So we
Okay.
do want that agreement signed before the end of the month.
I see. All right. At siguro when we have more clarity, Sec Toots, we'd like to get you again because I'm sure a lot of people would be interested. A number of people would be interested on this scholarship. Again, as I mentioned, there's so much to talk about. You mentioned just quickly, no, ano ho ba talaga yung in-demand jobs? Because when you mentioned a while ago in Saudi Arabia, andyan ang construction, andyan ang hotel industry. I think you said IT. And then you even mentioned Croatia where they want to expand.
Yes.
Is that new? Marami na ho bang Pilipino sa Croatia?
Ang sabi nila, they want to get more. Actually, ang kausap ko, yung ambassador ng Croatia, and ang sabi nga niya, they want to have a labor agreement with us. They really need workers sa hotel and tourism sector, and they are comfortable with Filipino workers. But right now, there are less than, I think, 5,000 in Croatia.
Really?
But they see that number growing more. Isang challenge, wala silang embassy dito. And so they want us to sign an agreement so they can also put up I guess, no, have a more permanent diplomatic presence here. But I may be overstepping because that should be something for them to say. So I apologize for that. But yun, Croatia, Hungary, yung Ministry of Foreign Affairs nila ang nagsasabi na please put up a migrant workers office here in Budapest. So Vienna, through Ambassador Luli Arroyo, they also want to engage in bilateral labor agreements. Very interesting, but our traditional partners like UAE wants to increase the number of OFWs. And again, we're not talking of health workers.
Yeah.
We're talking of professionals in the fields of hospitality, IT, and engineers, no, sa construction. Kasi all these countries, I guess, especially in the Middle East, are on the path of economic diversification. So, and Saudi Arabia, and there's a delegation visiting from Saudi Arabia next week, has said they will need more, at least a million more workers from the Philippines within the next from 18 to 24 months. So we are preparing for that as well. Kaya nga we need to talk to TESDA about it and put together a special hiring program na doon nakatutok naman for Saudi Arabia.
For the 1 million jobs, 1 million jobs in 2 years.
Yeah, for Saudi Arabia alone.
Yeah.
So, Pinky, what we are seeing is widespread acute labor shortages. And because of the excellence and good reputation of our OFWs, they have come knocking at our doors. It's not us doing the marketing. Sila yung almost every week may courtesy visits kami sa mga ambassadors, and they all want to discuss. Like the other day, Oman, for the first time, they said, can we sign a labor agreement with you? Kasi wala pa pala tayong labor agreement at all with Oman.
Okay.
But we have been deploying workers there.
It seems that marami pong lumiligaw ngayon sa DMW para po sa mapagtibay itong labor agreements with different countries. Of course, that's very good news. In relation to that, you also had a press conference recently on cementing stronger relations of our employees abroad and their recruiters as well. We'll try to talk about that. And yung pong Tier 1 tayo recently, as announced by the US, those two topics we'll discuss after the break, and hopefully yung unpaid wages ng ating mga kababayan kahit saglit mapag-usapan natin maya-maya lamang. We'll be right back. Watching the source on CNN Philippines, I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, Migrant Workers Secretary Toots Ople. We're gonna have to do this fast talk. Update po doon sa unpaid wages ng ating mga kababayan. Sec Toots, kailan ho kaya ito mangyayari?
Well, I think Saudi Arabia is also keen on resolving itong unpaid claims. And may committee sila that meets every week.
Yeah.
Yung pera ay nasa Ministry of Finance na. And I think we will be getting some updates from them in the coming weeks.
Okay. I know you've always been very careful about this kasi ang dami pong kababayan natin yung talagang umaasa dito. But what is the number you're looking at? Ilan ho ba sila? 10,000, 12,000 ho ba?
Well, Saudi Arabia maintains its own database of foreign workers. So ang sabi sa amin, they have their list. And we submitted our list, so they will validate. They were very appreciative na we also gave them a list of our own claimants.
And how
so,
many?
Mapapadali yung proseso.
Ilan po yung list natin sa claimants?
I think yung sa atin, it was at 12,000. And then meron another 2,000 that have no supporting documents. Hindi na nila maalala yung ikama nila. Wala na silang ma-attach na any evidence of having worked there.
All right, okay. So, Sec Toots, last the Philippines maintained, apparently, there was a report last night, I believe it's Tier 1 status doon po sa US 2023 Trafficking in Persons report for the 8th consecutive year. This basically means that the government of the Philippines fully met the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking in persons under the U.S. Trafficking Victims Act. So tell us more about this.
Yes, this is we should all be extremely happy and celebrate this remarkable feat, because 8 years in succession, that shows a strong commitment and consistent performance on the part of the Philippine government, civil society, and all our partners. So kudos to IACAT. And alam mo, Pinky, this also has a bearing on how the other countries perceive us. Kasi it also comes up in our talks na we have been in the Tier 1, so alam nila we are very strong on migrant workers' rights protection. And especially the first world countries, they feel confident in dealing with us kasi alam nila that we will not tolerate any shenanigans that would lead to the exploitation of our migrant workers. And so it's a source of comfort for those who want to reach out to us. And it's also we are the only ASEAN country na 8 years in succession nasa Tier 1, and tayo lang and Singapore ang nasa Tier 1.
Really? That's very good
based
news.
on that report.
Okay,
Yes.
Migrant Workers Secretary Toots Ople, I have so much more questions, but we've run out of time. I hope to have you again. Please take care of yourself, and thank you for your time.
Regards to your family, Pinky. God
Opo.
bless.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.